just heard the Benchwarmers Click and Six Cardinal track off their album, The Italian Job, called Charlie Crocker. Go check out The Italian Job, available on all streaming platforms. And let's get into this, man, because REKS, you are definitely familiar with the Benchwarmers Click, right?
My brothers, you know what I mean? Like, those are two of the my closest from the Florida area. You know, all the time that I put in Florida, and yeah, you said it right. I put a lot of work in Florida, in Broward County, Miami-Dade County. You know, I was in living in Broward County the entire time, but those two are like the first two I truly met out there. And you know, we put so much work in. I think we have like an album of material, like just sitting. It might just be sitting in Joker's computer. I've done so much work with them. I love what they do. So yeah, those are beyond this music. Those are my brothers right there.
And I played a track that you released with them. Well, they released on their first album, Adventures in 8-Bit, a track called Dropping Bombs. I played it on an episode that I did with them, man. Very dope track, very ill video too.
Yes, I love it, man. Dropping Bombs, I remember. And that's produced entirely by homie out of the UK, right? His name is slipping me, but
his name's slipping me right now too. But I think it's Juby or Jube.
Jube, yes. Super dope producer too, Jube, yeah. And that Adventure in 8-Bit, they came with a dope concept, kind of like, you know, before other people. I think other people might have, like, you know, tapped into that whole 8-bit concept in music a little later, but they were the first ones that I really saw, you know, approach doing something like that. So I thought that was really dope what they did with that project.
Yeah, I mean, when they definitely tapped into it differently than I had seen prior to that. I had seen Domingo release an album, I think, called Game Over, but his choice in samples wasn't just 8-bit samples. It was also like Nintendo 64 samples and samples from PlayStation and things like that. Whereas this project that the Benchwarmers did, it really had that vintage sound to the beats because the producer focused on sampling like that 8-bit sound, you know what I mean? So I thought it was really fresh, man.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. That's what made it unique for me, and that's what made it, like, you know, so specifically different than you know, every other one that kind of tapped into that genre. So yeah, man. Trav and Joker, those my broskies, man. I love putting in work with them. I always have, you know, and I appreciate every time I get some time to spend with them.
You know who's somebody that also dived into the 8-bit, sampling the 8-bit Nintendo game and did it really well on one particular track that I love, which is an album that you had a feature on, was your homie Statik Selectah when he did the joint for Big Shug.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
He did that joint for Big Shug that's he sampled Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
But yeah, Statik obviously, just, you know, the monster, one of the greats doing it, you know, so dedicated to keeping the music fresh and vibrant, and you know, he's a giant in what we do. Coming from where we came from, for him to be in the position he's in, I'm so proud of him. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so for the people that are familiar with you that aren't aware, you know, because I had already mentioned you put in work down here. You were living down in Florida for some time. What brought you down to Florida? And did you come to Florida straight from Boston, or were you living in somewhere else and then came to Florida? What even brought you here in the first place?
So yeah, I was in Massachusetts. A lot of times people, like, you know, confuse like where I'm from, I'm originally from Lawrence, Massachusetts. That's not Boston. It's north of Boston. But I spent a lot of time in Boston as well. The same way I spent, yeah, I lived almost 8 years of my life in Florida. So I put a lot of time in down there, and the same thing in Boston. Even though I'm originally, like I said, from Lawrence. But a change of scenery for the family resulted in us going down to Florida, and my two young kings were practically raised. My youngest, Josiah, has lived in Florida, the majority of his life. He just recently moved out of Florida. We were living in Florida this past year, and I actually moved to Georgia a few months ago. But we put a lot of time in Florida, and it was more so, like I said, change of scenery, growth. Uh, I love up north, but the opportunities for people, black and brown people in the South, I see so much opportunity, especially here in Georgia. And so the objective is to go out for the land grab and get involved in what my wife and I are focused on is like health and wellness and mind, body, and spirit healing. And because of those things, we find so much of that, so much of that tapestry and culture where we are located now in Georgia. So we're excited to expand beyond just what we do with our artistic endeavors. There's so much more we can do with like I said, the health and wellness field.
Word. Yeah. So real quick, top three things you miss about Florida. Top three things you don't miss about Florida. Now that you out in GA.
Honestly, I love the weather. I love the weather personally, being able to be by the beaches and the hip hop culture down there was surprisingly so dope. When I came down there and to be part of like that culture, like I didn't expect it to not be dope. What I didn't expect is there to be such a vibrant underground, akin to what I had just come from, but just getting down there and moving and shaking with cats like Hazardous Sounds and Mnemonics and, H and Serum and Heron and, what I mean, the endless list of like incredible individuals, Knowledge Medina, LMS, Saheed, it's just like incredible, and rest in peace to my brother John Wilson, So like, being down there, I was able to like, do so much in a beautiful extension of the culture. Loxley and the list goes on, man. Like just dope cats down in South Florida, and I'm just thankful to have the opportunity to be a part of that. You know what I mean?
Number one thing you don't miss about Florida.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention that. So I definitely the distance between things, because for the longest period of time I wasn't driving, so to get around is so like difficult if you're not whipping, especially like public transportation is insane. I was always coming from Massachusetts. Public transportation is everything. Take the train wherever you want to go, you within an instant. And it just wasn't like that in Broward. You know what I mean? And you had that kind of system set up. So like I wasn't really fond of that, to be honest. But I had great experiences in Florida. Like it's always going to be like a second home to me. I'm always going to go back and forth because I've gained so many friendships that beyond this music thing, beyond any of that part, I'm going to be in South Florida, for the rest of my life, to just kick it and lounge with people I love.
That's what's up, man. And you mentioned a lot of names. Rest in peace to the homie John Wilson, especially. One of the names you mentioned was a large part of this next track that I'm going to play. And it's definitely one from your catalog. And there's a lot to talk about here. So let's get this banger to the people.